Welcome back to qualifying and provisional practice from the Indy 500 for the 2003 US Grand Prix, and now we're going to go back to the 1973, 30 years ago, German Grand Prix with Jackie Stewart. Welcome, Jackie. Thanks for coming out and joining us here.
Well, David, thank you very much. Nice to be back in a commentary position here at Indianapolis. I came here for many years under the auspices of ABC doing the Wide World of Sports program of the 500, but it's certainly nice to be back.
Well, you're going to see some great footage of your win in 1973 at the German Grand Prix. Your teammate Francois Sever was second, and it was one of the races that, of course, stamped you as, at that time, you had the most wins of all. You're just about to click out Jimmy Clark for that 25 wins. You got your 25th win in that 73, and of course it was your last. It turned out to be your last win. Yeah,
last win I ever had in Grand Prix racing, and it's not a bad place to have it. The Nürburgring, which was unquestionably the world's most difficult racetrack.
And here we see the cars just coming up to the grid for that 1973 German Grand Prix. We'll see you and Ken Tyrrell just walking down there behind your car. Big crowd on hand. You used to have huge crowds at the old Nürburgring. Of course, 14 miles, you could pack a lot of people in there.
375,000 people came to watch the Nürburgring. The German Grand Prix was a giant. It was the most difficult, most demanding Grand Prix circuit in the world by a long way. It's 23 miles per lap, 187 corners per lap. That's me getting into the Tyrrell. Tyrrell that year had a great car. We were all using the Ford engine, of course, and the whole field almost, with the exception of Ferrari and one or two others, using the DFV Ford, the Cosworth. And it really was a very competitive field.
So as they strap Jackie Stewart in for the 1973 Grand Prix, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back with more of that race in just a moment. Stay right here with us. Welcome back to the German Grand Prix of 1973. Yeah, 30 years ago, and on the pole is Jackie Stewart. Ronnie Peterson alongside him in the Team Lotus car, and in third is Francois Sever, Jackie's teammate. And Jackie Ickx is in the McLaren in fourth spot. There you see Ronnie Peterson. And the pole sitter there moves up to the grid. No installation of that in those days, Jackie.
No, they were frightened that we saw the dangers involved and wouldn't let us out there in case we didn't come back. But it was very important to get a good start at Nürburgring, because it's quite a long trip down to what they call the south hairpin or the south turn before heading back in front of the back end of the pits and then going on to the circuit proper. An amazing racetrack. It was by far the most difficult in the world, and really if I had never won the Nürburgring there would be something desperately missing. That there is James. No, that's James
Jackie
Hunt.
Stewart. That's Jackie Ickx.
Jackie Ickx in the dark helmet in the Yardley car. The McLaren, Denny Holm in the straight there, back in the McLaren car. Reutemann just on the right of the picture there. They're obviously getting to a crescendo. Started in a flag in those days. A bit of oil come out of Peterson's car. That's not a good sight, and not a bad start, but my teammate made a bomber of a start. Ronnie Peterson out dragging me down there as I can't even remember him doing that to me. How awful.
How dare he?
So, but I do take the lead going into the first corner, and my teammate's with me. He's closed out, and that's nice round there. It's quite a little bit of banking. It's a little bit like the Indy track in that respect. That corner had a little bit of banking as we got now behind the pits. Going behind the pits, and then as you see us coming into the picture there, we used to get signals at the back end of the pits as well as in the front of the pits. Busy crowd going in there. Everybody was always frightened of the Nürburgring. 14.7 miles around, 23 kilometres.
And about 175 corners, but not just the corners. As you can see from here already, every single one of those corners was either going uphill, going downhill, on the top of, or at the bottom of a hill. Big
gradient change. Now you go into the wooded section, and there were hedges instead of barriers there. You can see it, that safety has been improved enormously. We closed the Nürburgring later on because of the danger. The Flugplatz, where you take off completely, the car leaves, full tanks at that point. That's Jackie Ickx and the McLaren there, going into the Eifel Mountains of the Nürburgring, a region that now owns the Nürburgring itself. The German government owns it. They're again one of these other rises. Tyrrell first and second, the Ford engine doing very well. It was dominant at that time. Most of the fast guys were in the Ford DFV engine. But look at the scenery of that place. 375,000 people around there. Such a lot of space. Of course, they only ever saw the cars every 7 minutes.
This is that run down to the Fox Ruhr. This is Adenauer Forest after the Fox Ruhr, this tight left-hander, your teammate, hanging on pretty well there.
Yeah, very talented driver, Francois Sever, and very good driver indeed. I think if he hadn't lost his life at the end of that season, he could have gone on to World Championship level. I think he would have been World Champion. Ronnie defending his position there pretty heavily from X. Ronnie was a very fast driver as well. Ronnie Peterson from Sweden, and the black car there, the John Player Special. Television was difficult in those days to cover those 23 kilometres around these 187 kilometres in those days.
But of course the other thing is, I can't believe the quality of this video from so long ago. And of course, as you say, very, very difficult to do this sort of thing around the Nürburgring. It was such a long way around. Look at the crowd on that hill at the back there.
That was the descent to Adenauer. That's over the top of what they call Adenauer village. There's a hospital just below it. Very, very convenient. And it's called the Krankenhaus, they call it in German. Not using the car too much, going up another hill. That's the Adenauer bit there. Look at a bit of passing going on. Ronnie.
That's Ronnie Peterson slowing up there. So Jackie X assumes a third position behind you two, between you and your teammate Francois Sever.
Now you go up a very fast area. Indeed, it's towards this area that we're heading now, where Jackie X had his big accident in 1976. There's Ronnie. The smoke that we saw in the starting gate, probably the cause of this. Obviously trying to see what's wrong, but it's not going to restart.
You two have obviously got a good lead already over Jackie X, and then right behind them is Nicky Lauda in the BRM.
Well, Nicky, of course, was to go. There's Emerson Fittipaldi there. Emerson and that car. That is the carousel. Look at the action of the hand and the wrist on there. It was a bowl that you went into. You had to be sure to come out of it the right way, or the car would actually fly right over the barrier.
If you popped out early, I mean, you were in big trouble.
Yeah.
And of course, the thing was, this year was the big battle between you and Emerson Fittipaldi. Emerson Fittipaldi was the champion in 1972, and it was quite a duke out there. You see, Emerson, between you two throughout the year, although finally you assumed control towards the end.
Well, Emerson was a great competitor, somebody I'd enjoyed racing against very much, and clearly I'm still a friend with him today. There's Ronnie. He's gone a little further, and he's still very anxious about what's wrong. I think I would have walked home by now. At least I got a ride home.
Apparently it was a faulty distributor that put him out of the race. This is Mike Beutler. You remember old Mike Beutler?
Yes, Mike Beutler driving. That was a March he was driving at that time. He's obviously got a problems. Just trying to get it home. He doesn't want to walk.
No, an extremely long walk.
Again, you see the expanse of the spectator. They used to come and camp for the whole. It's the swallowtail, that's called in English. And it's one of the faster areas of the Nürburgring. It was an immensely powerful racetrack to drive on. To memorise it completely, David, as you'll remember, was no easy matter. There they're going into the little swallowtail.
Yeah, the little Schwalbenschwanz, which had that back turn, a bit like the carousel. But the road just moved all the time. I mean, at this stage, they actually had got curbing and guardrail, which was in 1973 had only just been done.
Yes, and we insisted on that, but of course they couldn't police it very well. This is coming onto the pit straight now, and clearly at the end of the first lap, I've got a comfortable lead on Francois, who has got a comfortable lead on the rest of the field. Using every bit of the road still. This was a bit of the racetrack that was very easy to remember. The biggest challenge was going over blind hills that you couldn't see the other side, and you were doing up to 175, 180 miles an hour in those days. Never much faster than that at the Nürburgring.
No, that straight was pretty long at the that led up to the start-finish line here. There was a long straight, a couple of swerves before you got there. But as Jackie and Francois Sever check out in the 1973 German Grand Prix, we'll take a short break and we'll be back with more of this fantastic race with Jackie Stewart in just a moment. Stay right here with us on Speed. Welcome back to the 1973 German Grand Prix, where Jackie Stewart and his teammate Francois Sever are leading, and Jackie Stewart is sitting right here with us now. Jackie X was running third in the McLaren.
Well, it looks like we're moving it along a little bit. I must have just touched the edge of the grass there, put a bit of a dust cloud up. This is from somewhat behind. That's Carlos Paci in the finer car. That's the Surtees car. There's Emerson Fittipaldi in the John Player Special, carrying number one because he was the reigning world champion that year from 1972. Emerson, of course, of great Brazilian fame, twice world champion, a great hero that's really put a spark into Brazilian Grand Prix racing. There's a BRM.
That's Clay Regazzoni.
Clay obviously had trouble and pulled off. This must be the end of the second or third lap now, because I've got a bigger lead. That's Francois behind me there, turning the car in. A second turn in there, I noticed. Must have been a little compliance in the front end.
Francois hanging on pretty well here to you.
Well, I believe Francois Sever was going to be a great racing driver. I believe that day, actually, had I not known the Nürburgring as well as I did, I think he might have been able to pass me. He was getting quicker and quicker as the year went on. I had a very high respect for his driving.
How many times had he driven there before, do you know?
He had driven in Formula 2, as we all had. In those days, you'll remember, David, you'd driven there, I'm sure, in Formula 2 or in sports cars.
Sports cars, mate. I drove in the 67 Grand Prix in a Formula 2 car when they had Formula 1 and Formula 2
I remember
cars.
that well. There's somebody hanging out a little bit.
That's Jackie Hicks. He's in third spot. As you can see, it's what they call a solid third spot. In other words, he's miles behind you and miles in front of fourth.
Well, he was a very good Nürburgring driver. He had driven sports cars there, he had driven Formula 2 cars there, and he was good there. There we have Beutler in. I think that's Mike Beutler retiring. Another Surtees, Carlos Paci with the car number 24 that you're seeing there, climbing up to the carousel. Now he's going to drop it into the carousel. You'll see the concrete in the lower part, very hard on the driver's wrist going round there. Got to be careful not to come out too early. He came out about the right time, heading up now uphill. Quite a performance there.
He was running in fourth spot, and he had just set the fastest lap of the race in 7 minutes 11 seconds. So
there's Jochen Mass, I think, there in that car.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, the helmet, I remember.
Heavens above.
Yeah, and then a big gap between Francois and I to look for the next car. I remember one year I came in here, I was 30 seconds ahead after the first lap.
But that was in the rain.
That was in the rain.
Yeah, you had a fantastic rain right there in 1968.
That's correct. Here's, of course, Jackie Hicks in the McLaren. That was the third place positioner. There's the pits on the right-hand side. As we went round this loop, we would be getting new pit signals coming up the back. There's
You're
Jackie.
Completely gone now. We're starting lap 9 here, and already the gap between you and Hicks is nearly 30 seconds, 26 and a half seconds.
Well, the Nürburgring was a place that you could take big advantage of another driver. It was by far the greatest driver circuit in the world. Biggest challenge that anybody could face.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. I mean, just incredible racetrack, really.
Biggest thing was remembering it. You know, I'm dyslexic and it's tough for me to do normal things. Nürburgring I could handle. I could remember every corner now and every gear shift and every braking distance.
Well, that's 6th, 7th and 8th. Emerson Fittipaldi in the Lotus, Jochen Mass, and Jackie Oliver is that black car in the back there, in the shadow.
Jackie Oliver still very much involved in historic racing in the United Kingdom, very enthusiastic, coming up to the Flugplatz, fly there. If you're hot on it, you actually take off. By now we've obviously settled down a little bit. Very quick over here, that you're talking 4th and 5th gear up there.
This was a very fast, slightly downhill run here to Arenberg before you went down the Foxruhr or the Foxhole. An incredibly quick downhill section here with all these very fast sweepers.
It would never be allowed today in safety. You could never do it nowadays because you couldn't contain the accident. There wasn't enough room to get marshals and fire people and emergency crews round it. There's another rise and fall there. That's the Flugplatz.
Frank Gardner rolled a Cobra, Shelby Cobra, right about here in about 1966. And rolled the thing up, and he came back into the pits wearing that little hat of his, and I said to him, how was it out there? And he said, oh, it just went light, dark a few times. So, I mean, it's fast there. And as you can see, you two have got a huge lead here.
There's the chopper. Of course, they had to use choppers occasionally because of the length of the racetrack. They couldn't afford to carry cameras in every area of the racetrack. In the more remote areas, it really is a long way away from it. And Jochen Mass ahead of Jackie Oliver in that last shot. You're seeing them again.
You could never lay cable. There's Fittipaldi.
Well, that's Jochen Mass there. And there is Jackie Oliver right behind them. Emerson must have been having trouble that day because he really wasn't up there.
No, he was well down. He was well over a minute behind you guys.
I can't remember what was happening to us. That white middle car there's got these dampers aren't firm enough. He was getting bad rebound. That was the Jochen Mass car. He wasn't getting good handling there. Not stiff enough dampers in the back. In the Nürburgring, you had to have a car that you could really feel. He's having a problem with that, but he's certainly pushing Emerson Fittipaldi at that time. Look, he's looking for a way round him.
He's pushing very hard.
Not a lot of places to pass. You had to rely on somebody else making a mistake, and they all did at the Nürburgring.
Well, terribly easy to make a mistake there. The surface is always, it changed a lot from one side of the circuit to the other. It had a very wide, coarse grain to it, which got slippery. And of course, under these trees here, if you'd had any rain in the previous few hours, it always stayed wet for such a long time.
Well, it was a
beautiful day this day, but I mean...
It was a good day, and it was a great day for me because it's nice to lead the German Grand Prix. I think I won the Nürburgring 4 times, but it was an amazing place to race.
Well, as we watch, Jackie Stewart swung well on his way to win the 1973 German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. We'll take a short break, and we'll be right back with the finish in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to the last lap of the German Grand Prix in 1973. There you see the leader of that race, Jackie Stewart, and he's sitting right alongside me here in the booth at Indianapolis. Jackie, that was a fantastic day. It was your final win, it turned out, and your 27th, so you had the most wins of anybody up till that time.
A record I think I held it for 14 years until Alan Prost. The car's still moving along quite well, but we had taken it off the boil. You know, there wasn't a big rush. Francois was far enough behind me that I didn't have to worry too much about him, and we were, as a team, further than anybody else. That's through the carousel again, and you see the hand.
Yeah, the reaction through the wheel, terrific there.
Yeah, no power steering in these days. That's when men were men.
That's when, absolutely.
Again, it's very reminiscent for me and very nostalgic for me to watch this. I've never seen this before. Just to see that car, it was a beautifully balanced racing car. 006 was the registration of it.
Now that car was at Monterey just a few weeks ago, wasn't it?
It was indeed, and there is Jackie X in 3rd position. Still unstable. He looks really unstable under braking, that car. It wasn't as good a motor car as ours. Using the same engine, which was great because it meant that motor racing was generally, this is the carousel, dipping into it. There's Jackie, hands working, maybe a little less than mine, less feedback up the steering.
Jackie, as you said, was a bit of a master of the ring. He won a lot of races there the end, and a lot of times in sports cars as well.
Still with Jackie, going round, and very few advertising banners on the racetrack in those days. Commercialism hadn't really got into the Nürburgring. There you go. That's the little carousel we're coming up to.
And you drop into this one.
It's a mild one in comparison to the big one. And you've got to get this one right. This is it here. You're not seeing it in full focus there. The crowd are keeping you from seeing it. But you come out of that and you go through a left-hander, a right-hander, and then you go into the main straight.
So you had to get it right to get yourself launched down. Here is that right-hander.
That was a very important corner. There for the helicopter shot of the main straight. Of course, you had hedges on either side. It was really quite claustrophobic. And there was a couple of signs. We didn't have good marker signs in those days, but there was a cow crossing. Literally a crossing little plaque that said cows crossing, and that was a good place to brake.
Always a good place, especially when the cows were crossing. There's these last couple of corners that lead up to start finish,
and here's the man giving the famous checkered flag. Both of us well clear of the rest of the competition. A wonderful win for me. I was very proud of it to win the Nürburgring. Francois coming alongside, what a great teammate he was, and sadly to be killed at the end of that season. The American Grand Prix I withdrew from because of Francois Sever's death, in respect to him and qualifying. But very French, very dashing, tremendously good looking.
Very dashing, wasn't he? Yeah.
Oh, what a lot of damage he did.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Did the Can-Am as well. There's Jackie X, a long way behind in 3rd spot.
With McLaren, keep in mind and think of where McLaren is today. You're going to be watching them here in the US Grand Prix, contending for the World Championship. That was McLaren in those days. And look, Wilson Fittipaldi was there, as well as Emerson Fittipaldi. He was having a problem that day. He had had an accident, I understand, at the Dutch Grand Prix and had damaged his ankle, and therefore clearly he wasn't at the best of his form.
So you two just did the loop there through the south and north curve. You didn't have to go all the way around the track. There you are on the podium. You had that signature uniform too, Bernard Caillet there with you.
Francois and Joe Ramirez on the left, a great mechanic, a great engineer.
Joe Ramirez only retired right here at the US Grand Prix
Ken
a couple of
Tyrrell
years
with
ago.
the yellow on there. Jackie, very charming man. Prince Metternich, the man with the white hair, there, president of the FIA at that time.
That's right, yeah, and here you are going up on the podium.
Yep.
And you had that very special uniform.
Yes, it was made of fibre in those days. And there's Francois, all that good-looking guy.
Yeah.
Wonderful man to have as a teammate. Spraying the champagne, Martin Chandon in these days, of which I'm now on the board of.
Oh, are you? Now let's have a look at the results. Jackie Ickx there on the podium with you guys, his 22nd podium. So there you have it, the two Tyrrells, first and second. Jackie Ickx a long way back in third. Good run for Pache. Fittipaldi not having a good run for him with his ankle. Emerson Fittipaldi, Jochen Mass in the 30s, and Jackie Oliver in 8th spot in the shadow. Obviously not getting any points. Points in those days going down to 6.
Well, it was the German Grand Prix is one of the greats.
Well, that was absolutely one of the great circuits, and of course you had more than your fair share of wins. There's Revson in
Peter
the second.
Revson, a charming American driver, did a wonderful job of waving the stars and stripes. Henri Pescarolo won Le Mans many times. Rolf Stomelin, a German, again driving a Brabham, and Denny Hulme way back there in 12th position.
Not having a good run at all. And Graham Hill, of course, in the shadow, in the sort of twilight of his years, and Mike Hailwood in the other 30s.
Bringing up Regazzoni, a great Italian who was paralysed later on. Carlos Reutemann, who's now a senator, by the way, of a very big part of Argentina. George Foreman, another American in the shadow there, with Jean-Pierre Beltoise in the BRM. Nicky Lauda way back in 21st.
Yeah. And Ronnie Peterson, who was on the front row with you, retired very early, and Howden Ganley in the other Marvin.
What a career, 99 races, 27 victories, 3 world championships. But that was then. This is now. 47 minutes to go to provisional qualifying. We'll be right back.